course, I didn't take him serious. You know, I thought he meant send it to the slush pile, which I had already done. And so a couple of days later, I get an email from Greg Benford to Jim Bain, and I'm just CC'd on it, and it says, Jim, y'all check this guy's manuscript out. I like the presentation he gave. I think it would be something worth your while. And so Jim then emailed me and said, okay, send him the manuscript. Of course, I printed out Jim Bain's personal email address and stored it in 4 or 5 different locations on the planet that only I know where they are, so I could get in touch with him. And so a few months go by, 6 months go by, and I haven't heard anything, so I write up a sequel synopsis to Warp Speed, email it in to Jim, and say, Jim, I was wondering what you thought about the original manuscript, Warp Speed, that I sent you. This is a sequel I have in mind called The Quantum Connection. Told him a little bit about it, and said I could start on it whenever you're ready. And he sent me back an email, says, don't recall any of this. What is this about? So I found the email that I had stored on CDs and kept in different places and printed out and so on, and I copied it and sent it back to Jim. And he read it and said, oh yeah, I vaguely remember this. Resend me the manuscript. I don't know what I did with it. All right, so in the interim, I was working for a contractor. We were working as the prime contractor on a study to develop a nuclear electric propulsion spacecraft to go study Pluto and its moon Charon, and then the Kuiper Belt objects afterwards. And the proposal for the big money that we were competing for had to go in at some such and such date. And I was writing this thing. We had been up for about, oh man, I hadn't slept in 3 days, at least. We had been working around the clock for 3 weeks on this thing. And so I hadn't slept for about 3 days, and we finally finished the report. We turned it into NASA, and I come home about 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday. And I'm going to go to bed, close all the curtains, go to bed, and dare anyone to bother me for about 2 days as I catch up on my lack of sleep. And while I'm laying there, just got the lights turned out, just lay down, just close my eyes, the phone rings. And I'm thinking, oh God, something didn't go right with the proposal to get to NASA in time. I got to go back into work. I get up, crawl across the floor, answer the phone, and say, hello, and says, yeah, can I speak with Travis Taylor? This is Jim Bain at Bain Books. I thought, yeah? I woke up at that point. And Jim said, I liked your manuscript, Warp Speed, and I'd like to buy it. And I immediately said, sold. Didn't even ask him how much he wanted for it. I was just pleased to be a Bain author at that point. And then in the same conversation, Jim offered to buy the sequel. And he said, and pretty much anything else I wanted to write, that he was very interested in it. So since then, I've been a Bain author, and that's where my science fiction has gone. And that led me to my first meeting. Actually, Jim sent out Warp Speed to the several Bain authors. David Drake was one of them. I think Weber was one of them. And Ringo was one of them. And Ringo was the only one that responded. And it was something to the tune of, somebody needs to tell this guy that a sucking chest wound is a good sign that he needs to slow down. Because my main character in there gets a sucking chest wound, and he keeps going like Uberman. And but he does. That's part of the plot. But John thought that was funny, and then John and I started emailing, and he said he started showing me some pointers. You know, add this to it; it'll make it zing a little better, and add this and that. And so there's some of John's teachings even before my first book came out. That showed up in Warp Speed and then in the Quantum Connection. And John read it and he liked it, and he said it's the kind of stuff that's the Sense of Wonder, Doc Smith kind of stuff. That's what my first couple of books were about. And we stayed friends, we stayed in contact so much that we were at a con and started talking about writing a book together and doing some other things, and the rest is history.
So obviously I don't need to ask you if collaboration has been a positive experience for you.
I haven't had a negative experience collaboration yet. People say that you do, or that it happens, but I really haven't. I recently did a collaboration with. I haven't sold it yet. I mean, I think Bain's going to buy it, but We did it without giving a proposal. I just had the mood to write this book, and I'd been talking with Daryl Bain, who is one of the internet's biggest ebook sellers. He's probably the biggest science fiction ebook seller, and so I got talking with him about some of his stuff, and so we wrote 2 books together, just like that. They just came out and we wrote them in 2 months, 3 months, something like that. And I really liked the first one. We did a lot, and in fact, he was under a contract that it had to come out through a different publisher first. And so that first book we did together, I said, okay, well, you take that one to your publisher, then we'll write another one, and I'm going to offer it to Bain. And because I really like to see Daryl's books become, more widely known too, because there's some of them pretty good. And so anyway, that first one that came out through the e-publisher, it's been like the #1 science fiction ebook since it came out many months ago. And it's been a big seller and just as regular fiction on the bestseller list. And then we wrote another book that we submitted directly to Bain, and we'll hear something about it sooner or later. I think Tony's considering it.
A number of writers credit Jim Bain with keeping military fiction, science or otherwise, alive. What are your thoughts on that and on Jim?
I wouldn't be a science fiction writer probably if it weren't for Jim Bain. I'd probably gave up at that point and said, well, it's taking too much of my time, and gone back to fully focus on my day job. But Jim saw something in what I was writing that was interesting and intriguing and wasn't really there. In fact, he sent an email to David Drake, and I believe it was Weber and Ringo and to Tony Weisskopf and a couple other. Eric Flint was one of them, and said, I'm practically spin dizzy about this book because it's the golden era of science fiction that we haven't seen in years. That's what he said about Warp Speed. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. And that sort of inspired me to do more as well. And, you look around at the hard science and the mill science fiction and the hard science mill SF crossovers and all that. Who else is doing it? It's not in the movies anymore, hardly. It's not, maybe some on Sci-Fi Channel back when Stargate SG-1 was still going, right? But Tor is mostly fantasy and speculative kinds of fiction. And the other big houses are also, they're doing Star Wars kinds of things, Star Trek kinds of things. There's not much boots on the ground that seems to me to really appeal to not only the sense of wonder from the hard science part of it and the positive aspects of the world, but also from the heroic aspects of writing that you really like to hear about. That's one of the things that Tony Weisskopf, the executive editor at Bain, told me about my writing. She said, you always use the same theme. And I said, what are you talking about? All my books are about something different. And she said, well, it's always heroism. And I said, well, that's what inspires me, is heroism, I guess. And I have ideas of the really cool science theme that is usually what gives me the idea for the book. But the characters are always heroes. I mean, they always turn out to be heroes. Like my latest, One Day on Mars series, it's all about, space marines and fighter pilots and what they have to put up with on a day-to-day basis and how just insane they must be, or insanely courageous they must be, to put themselves into the positions that they are putting themselves into. And for what reason? Not to pay. It's not to pay. So I credit Bain Books for that. Some of the video game books I think may be on the edge of the military science fiction genre, but they're certainly not hard science, military science fiction, for sure.
I'm going in a slightly different direction. What do you think of blogging and the changes in communications technology?
Those are sort of two different questions if you ask me, but blogging has been around forever. It just hasn't been as easily found. There were always bulletin boards, even back in the ARPANET days before the internet was really big. But I think that blogging actually offers a venue that anybody can get their opinion out to millions of people. And you can see now that like all the news channels, they have expert bloggers or at least expert blogosphere surfers that say what they're seeing and hearing on the internet. And it's such a, I think it's a wonderful way to get information out to the people and for people to see other people's opinions. Because, you know, they're blogs. Keep in mind, they're blogs. They're people's opinions. Doesn't mean that they're accurate. Doesn't mean they're correct. But it tells you what those people think is correct.